The morning in the small suburban town was quiet in a way that made every sound seem amplified. Birds called from the hedges lining the streets, the tires of an early commuter crunched on wet asphalt, and the faint hum of distant traffic whispered through the neighborhood. The houses, all neatly terraced, looked uniform in their brick and tile, but one held a secret that would unravel quietly, slowly, yet leave a scar that never healed. It was Tina Satchwell's home, ordinary in every outward sensor, modest, well-kept house on a street where everyone waved, nodded, and smiled. But inside, in the silence of rooms that had known laughter, arguments, and love, a terrible absence lingered. Tina had been gone for hours before anyone noticed. She had not left a note, no farewell words to the neighbors, no sign she intended to disappear. She had simply vanished, as if the walls themselves had swallowed her. The last memory anyone held of her was of that gentle smile, the way she tended her small garden, the careful way she swept the sidewalk in front of her home. Her neighbors remembered her kindness, the tea she once offered on a sunny morning, the gentle laugh that punctuated the quiet moments of ordinary days. But kindness, as Eleanor Finch would soon realize, did not make anyone immune to the shadows that could form within the confines of a home. Detective Inspector Eleanor Finch arrived at the scene late that morning. She was a woman of careful precision, of quiet observation, the kind of investigator who noticed the small details, the scuff of a shoe on the carpet, the faint scent of a perfume that lingered too long, the subtle disorder that betrayed a story untold. Eleanor was 46, seasoned in her work, carrying the weight of unsolved cases on her shoulders. She had faced grief, manipulation, and deceit in her years on the force. But something about Tina's case set her senses on alert. There was a subtle wrongness here, something that whispered beneath the veneer of normalcy. Mark Satchwell greeted Eleanor at the door, his demeanor calm, almost unnervingly so. He was composed, measured, cooperative to the point of being unsettling. Every word he spoke was precise, each pause calculated. "She's probably just out," he suggested. "She likes to take walks. Maybe she's visiting a friend." But Eleanor's instincts told her otherwise. His eyes betrayed a tension that his words did not. He was careful, he was deliberate, and above all, he was hiding something, but what, she could not yet say. Inside the house, the stillness pressed down. Eleanor moved from room to room with practiced caution, observing the little details. The living room was tidy, books on shelves aligned perfectly. Photographs on the mantelpiece captured moments of ordinary domestic life, a family holiday, birthdays, smiles frozen in time. The kitchen showed signs of routine, a mug left drying on a dish rack, the faint aroma of tea lingering in the air. But the staircase, the narrow winding staircase that led to the bedrooms above, drew Eleanor's gaze as if it demanded attention. There was a subtle sense of foreboding in its presence. The way shadows clung to the corners, the way the light fell just slightly off. It was ordinary, yet it felt ominous. Neighbors arrived, some curious, some concerned. They spoke in hushed tones, recounting Tina's habits, her routines, the gentle rhythms of her days. Eleanor listened, absorbing each word, noting inconsistencies, small gaps in memory, the way people wanted to believe the best while glossing over subtle signs of something wrong. "She was always careful," said one neighbor, wringing her hands. "Always polite, always present. It's just not like her to disappear." Hours passed, calls to friends, family, and acquaintances revealed nothing. Tina had left no trace. Her phone was inactive, her bank transactions showed no unusual activity, and there were no witnesses. Eleanor's frustration grew, but she masked it with calm precision. She knew that in cases like this, patience, attention, and an almost obsessive focus on detail were the only tools that could uncover truth. Mark continued to speak with officers, his words carefully measured, yet every so often, a fleeting expression crossed his face, a shadow of impatience, a flicker of unease. Eleanor noticed, but she did not confront him immediately. There was no rush. Truth, she had learned, revealed itself in time. Small inconsistencies built a map of reality, a pattern of silence and deception that often told far more than confession ever could. As evening descended, Eleanor found herself standing at the base of the staircase. The shadows had lengthened, casting shapes that seemed almost sentient, twisting and curling along the walls. She reached out, her fingers brushing the polished wood, feeling the history embedded within its grain. Steps that had once carried laughter, the creak of a child running, the quiet shuffle of nightly routines, now seemed to echo the absence that defined the house. This staircase, ordinary and unremarkable, held a story no one wanted to hear. The night deepened, and with it the silence grew heavier. Eleanor left the house reluctantly, glancing back at the faint glow of the kitchen light through the curtains. She knew that someone inside that house, or perhaps the house itself, was holding its secrets tightly, and she also knew that she would not leave until those secrets were uncovered. The first day ended not with answers, but with questions. Tina Satchwell was gone. Mark Satchwell remained calm, and the staircase stood silently, waiting for someone patient enough, persistent enough to uncover the truth buried just beneath its steps. Please like, share and subscribe my channel. The days after Tina Satchwell vanished stretched like shadows across the town, quiet at first, but heavy with unspoken fear. Neighbors whispered in doorways, exchanging glances that carried more questions than answers. Mailboxes were checked twice, phones called repeatedly, but each inquiry ended with the same echoing silence. Tina's absence was not just physical, it was the sudden removal of warmth, laughter, and familiarity that made the world feel unsteady, as if a hidden pulse had been cut. Detective Inspector Eleanor Finch returned to the house the morning after her first visit. The sun had risen weakly, a pale disk behind clouds, casting a cold grey light over the neat terraced row. The street seemed ordinary, yet Eleanor knew better. Every ordinary street could hide extraordinary darkness, and this one had done so quietly, without anyone realizing, until the void became undeniable. Mark Satchwell opened the door with the same calm, measured demeanor he had shown before. His movements were precise, almost ritualistic. The way he straightened the doormat, adjusted his sleeve, nodded to Eleanor without a trace of nervousness. On the surface, he seemed composed. Beneath that surface, Eleanor could sense the flicker of calculation, the subtle tightening of muscles that betrayed a man who had rehearsed his public image to perfection. Eleanor's approach this time was different. She wasn't there to simply observe. She was there to probe, to uncover the fine lines between truth and performance. Her questions were gentle but persistent. "When was the last time you saw Tina?" she asked. Mark replied carefully. "Yesterday morning. She kissed me goodbye before going for her walk." His voice was steady, even, but Eleanor noticed a slight tension in his jaw. The kind of tension that appears when a person rehearses a lie over and over until it begins to feel like truth. She continued, "Did she mention anything unusual? Any plans? Any concerns?" Mark's eyes flickered for the briefest moment, almost imperceptibly, before he answered, "No, nothing. She seemed normal, as always." It was Eleanor's job to read the silences between the words, the hesitation in moments so fleeting they almost vanished. Every carefully constructed sentence was like a fragile thread, and she intended to tug until the whole pattern unraveled. The house remained the same as the day before, pristine and ordered. The kitchen gleamed, cups stacked neatly, dishes done. The living room was undisturbed, photographs on the mantelpiece capturing smiles frozen in happier times. But the staircase, that narrow winding staircase leading to the bedrooms, continued to draw Eleanor's attention. There was something about it that seemed alive in its stillness. She could almost hear echoes, the soft shuffle of feet, a whispered conversation, laughter that had long since vanished. She spent hours in the home, examining small details, the position of objects, fingerprints on surfaces, dust patterns on the banister. Everything was just as it should be, or so Mark wanted it to seem. Yet there was always something subtle, a sign that had been overlooked, a shoe slightly out of place, a door latched differently than normal, a faint, lingering scent of perfume that did not belong to anyone present. Eleanor recorded each observation, each tiny anomaly, knowing that these small details were the threads that could weave the whole story together. Outside, neighbors began to talk more openly. Some described Tina as cheerful, attentive, full of warmth. Others hinted at unease, subtle tension in the household. She stopped going out as much. One woman admitted quietly, "It's like she was afraid of something, or someone. I just don't know." The words sent a chill through Eleanor. Fear inside one's own home was a danger many never fully recognized until it was too late. Eleanor interviewed more of Tina's acquaintances that week. Friends spoke of casual visits that suddenly ceased, phone calls that went unanswered, plans that were cancelled without explanation. Each story layered another fragment of uncertainty, building a picture of a woman who had slowly vanished, long before she physically disappeared. The pattern was clear. Tina had been isolated. Eleanor felt it in her gut. This was no ordinary disappearance. Meanwhile, Mark maintained his calm, interacting with police officers with the same unflinching composure. His cooperation was meticulous, almost rehearsed, and yet Eleanor detected tiny inconsistencies. Dates did not always align perfectly. Recollections of Tina's last activities were vague, overly generalized. He emphasized routines, normalcy, as if repeating them would erase suspicion. Eleanor noted everything, understanding that truth often hid in the overlooked, in the contradictions and gaps between rehearsed statements. Back at the station, Eleanor pored over reports, revisited old notes, and compared statements. She grew increasingly concerned about the time that had passed since Tina's disappearance. The trail of evidence was cold, fading like morning mist, yet she refused to let it disappear completely. Every missing person deserved attention. Every unexplained absence deserved inquiry, and Tina deserved more than silence. Days turned into weeks. Media coverage began to dwindle, headlines faded, and public interest waned. Eleanor felt the weight of time pressing down on the case. Each day without answers was another day that Tina's story was obscured by doubt and forgetting. But she refused to relent. She returned to the house often, walking the rooms, standing at the base of the staircase, allowing herself to imagine Tina's presence, her laughter, the rhythm of her daily life. In doing so, she kept the memory alive, refusing to allow the house to hold Tina in shadow alone. Late one evening, Eleanor noticed a detail she had missed before, a small scuff mark on the edge of the staircase, faint but distinct. It seemed recent, or at least more recent than the surrounding wear. She knelt, examining it carefully, measuring, photographing, cataloguing. Every mark, every detail, could become a crucial piece of the puzzle. Somewhere in this house, hidden beneath the ordinary surface, was the truth. The more Eleanor investigated, the clearer it became that Tina's disappearance was not simply a case of wandering off. The patterns of isolation, the inconsistencies in Mark's accounts, the subtle signs of control all pointed toward a darkness that existed behind the closed doors of the home. And the staircase, so ordinary, so mundane, was a silent witness to every moment that led to this tragedy. Mark continued to maintain his composure. Yet, in quieter moments when he thought no one was observing, Eleanor noticed something. His eyes occasionally betrayed fear, frustration, or something darker. It was the kind of fleeting vulnerability that people try to hide, the shadow that reveals itself when the mask slips even for a moment. Eleanor knew that patience would uncover more than confrontation ever could. By the end of the chapter, Eleanor returned home, her mind racing with unanswered questions. She reviewed notes, photographs and timelines, piecing together fragments of the life Tina once led. Each detail, no matter how small, was a thread leading toward truth. And as night fell, she imagined Tina walking through the rooms, the stairs beneath her feet creaking softly in memory. Though she was gone, Eleanor felt her presence, guiding her, urging her not to give up. The chapter closes on the house, silent in the darkness, the staircase shadowed, waiting for the patient and persistent to reveal what had been hidden for far too long. Please like, share and subscribe my channel. Years had passed since Tina Satchwell vanished. The town moved on in its ordinary rhythms, unaware that beneath the surface of neat streets and tidy homes lay a truth that refused to stay buried. Headlines about Tina became brief mentions in local papers before fading entirely. Social media threads that had briefly buzzed with concern went silent. Life, in its relentless forward motion, swallowed the story like a tide erasing footprints from sand. But Detective Inspector Eleanor Finch never moved on. Eleanor's office was a quiet sanctuary of persistent obsession. Case files stacked high, photographs pinned to corkboards, timelines spread across her desk. Each small detail of Tina's life, the meetings, the phone calls, the quiet fears she might have harbored was catalogued with care. Eleanor often traced her finger along the staircase photograph, feeling as if she could reach into the past and touch what had been lost. The years had not dulled her resolve, they had sharpened it. She knew that truth, even when long ignored, always demanded discovery. It was a tip from a retired neighbor that reopened the investigation. The woman, frail with age, had hesitated for decades to speak. Fear had kept her silent. Now, time had granted her courage. I saw him, she whispered over the phone, her voice trembling. I saw him moving, things, under the stairs. I shouldn't have noticed, but I did. Eleanor's pulse quickened. The words were a spark, a fragile flame illuminating the dark corners of years-long silence. Returning to the house was like stepping into a shrine of lost time. Dust had settled into corners, the wallpaper had dulled, but nothing had changed fundamentally. The staircase remained, still ordinary in appearance, still sinister in its history. Eleanor moved carefully, her senses alert to every detail. The faint scent of perfume Tina's favorite still lingered faintly, though the house had been empty for so long. She knelt beside the baseboard, running her gloved fingers along a crack in the wood. Something was hidden beneath it. Forensic teams arrived, tools in hand, lights and cameras ready to document every discovery. The quiet hum of the neighborhood outside seemed distant and insignificant, compared to the intensity of the investigation inside. Every movement in the house felt purposeful. The staircase became a central focus. Floorboards were carefully lifted, dust disturbed. Shadows moved in ways that heightened the sense of suspense. Eleanor's heart raced with each step closer to the truth that had been waiting silently, patiently, for justice to arrive. Mark Satchwell was arrested quietly at his home. There was no dramatic confrontation, no last-minute attempt at escape. He was calm, but there was an undercurrent of tension Eleanor recognized immediately. She observed his expression closely during questioning. Lies, no matter how practiced, eventually cracked, and cracks reveal more than the unbroken mask ever could. Inside the house, the uncovering of what lay beneath the staircase was painstaking. Each layer of wood, each partition, each hidden cavity was meticulously examined. The discovery was devastating. Eleanor felt her stomach twist as the years of absence, the loneliness, and the fear that Tina had endured were finally revealed in physical form. The reality of what had been done to her could no longer be denied. Tina was found not just as evidence of a crime, but as a human being who had been silenced and hidden, a voice waiting to be heard. The moment of discovery was profoundly emotional. Eleanor stepped back, tears threatening as she surveyed the careful work that had brought the truth into light. For years, the world had assumed Tina had disappeared, perhaps by her own volition. Now the undeniable reality of her death, the injustice, the cruelty, the silence was undeniable. Eleanor felt a mixture of grief, relief, and righteous anger. This was not merely a solved case. It was a reclamation of Tina's story, her life, her presence in the world. Mark Satchwell's demeanor began to crumble in interrogation. Words stumbled, pauses lengthened, and the carefully rehearsed facade of innocence faltered. The man who had once presented an unflappable exterior was now exposed to the weight of his actions. Eleanor observed quietly, knowing that patience, persistence, and the undeniable evidence had brought him to this moment. Justice, though delayed, had arrived. In the days following the discovery, the town's awareness of the case surged. Media attention returned, this time focused not on disappearance but on revelation, not on rumor but on truth. Eleanor gave interviews, careful to honor Tina, to ensure that her story was told with respect and dignity. She spoke of the years of silence, the small clues, the persistence that ultimately led to the uncovering of the crime. The world listened, grieved, and reflected. Throughout it all, Eleanor returned frequently to the staircase. She ran her fingers along the worn wood, remembering the countless times she had stood there, imagining Tina's steps, her presence, the rhythm of her ordinary life abruptly cut short. Now, the staircase was a symbol not just of horror, but of perseverance, of the patience required to uncover truth buried deep beneath ordinary surfaces. As Mark faced trial, Eleanor reflected on the long journey. Years of doubt, frustration, and near despair had been redeemed by the persistence to seek justice. Tina's story, once hidden, was now reclaimed. The investigation had been grueling, painful, and emotionally exhausting, but the result was undeniable. Truth had emerged, and with it, the recognition of a life lost, a family betrayed, and a community forced to confront uncomfortable realities. The chapter closes with Eleanor standing outside the house at sunset. Shadows stretched across the street, long and slow. The staircase within the home was now carefully sealed, documented, and remembered. Eleanor felt a quiet sense of closure, though the grief remained. Tina had been found, her story told, her absence acknowledged. The house had remembered her long before the world did, and now the world would remember too. In that quiet moment, Eleanor whispered a promise she had carried for years. She would continue to uncover the truth wherever it lay hidden, no matter how long it took, no matter how deeply it was buried. Because the truth, Eleanor knew, was relentless. Time could hide it, silence could obscure it, but it would always demand to be heard. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel. The courtroom was quiet, the kind of silence that felt almost sacred, heavy with anticipation. Years had passed since Tina Satchwell disappeared, years that had been filled with unanswered questions, anxious nights, and the slow gnawing ache of unresolved grief. Now at last, the moment of reckoning had arrived. Detective Inspector Eleanor Finch sat near the front, her hands folded, her mind tracing the long, painstaking path that had brought them here. She remembered the first time she had stepped into Tina's home, the faint scent of perfume lingering in the still air, the staircase that had always drawn her gaze as if it knew secrets no one else could see. She remembered the way Mark Satchwell had greeted her with calm composure, hiding something deeper than ordinary fear, and she remembered the countless hours spent reviewing notes, photographs, statements, and small, subtle clues that had gradually led her to the truth. The prosecution laid out the evidence meticulously. Photographs, forensic reports, eyewitness accounts, and the painstaking documentation of the hidden compartment beneath the staircase were presented one by one. Each piece built a story not just of a disappearance, but of control, manipulation, and a life cruelly cut short. The jury listened attentively, the weight of each revelation pressing upon the room. Eleanor's heart ached with the memory of Tina, the ordinary woman who had once laughed in that house, who had gardened, cooked, and spoken with kindness, now remembered only through fragments of evidence. Mark Satchwell sat quietly, his expression increasingly strained. The calm facade he had perfected over years began to crack under the weight of undeniable truth. He shifted in his seat, his eyes darting toward the prosecution, toward Eleanor, toward the jury. The rehearsed mask of innocence could no longer hold. Every carefully worded statement, every measured pause, every act of outward composure was unmasked by facts and human testimony. Eleanor felt the familiar tightness in her chest, a combination of sadness, anger, and the quiet satisfaction of truth finally emerging. She knew this was more than a trial. It was a reclamation of Tina's story. It was a statement that, even when silence, fear, and time conspired to hide a crime, the truth could not be suppressed forever. Family members of Tina, long burdened by uncertainty and grief, sat together, their hands clasped tightly. Tears glimmered in the eyes of those who had waited years for this moment, a mixture of sorrow for what was lost and relief that justice was finally being served. Eleanor watched them, knowing that the hours, days, and years of work had been for this moment, the acknowledgement of a life, a voice, and a story that had been denied for far too long. As the trial continued, Eleanor reflected on the house, the staircase, and the hidden spaces that had contained Tina's final secret. Ordinary objects had concealed extraordinary horror, and yet, it had been the ordinary persistence of one investigator, the quiet, relentless pursuit of truth that had finally brought light into that darkness. She remembered standing at the base of the staircase, imagining Tina's presence, her footsteps, the rhythm of her daily life, and the terror that had accompanied her silence. Now, she could finally honor that presence by ensuring it was remembered, acknowledged, and understood. The verdict was delivered. Guilty. The words struck like thunder in the still room, reverberating through the hearts of everyone present. Mark Satchwell, once so composed, now showed the first signs of fear, his eyes reflecting the inescapable weight of consequence. Justice, long delayed, had finally arrived. In the days that followed, Eleanor returned to the house one last time. The staircase, once the silent witness to so much, was carefully documented, sealed, and preserved for evidence. The home that had harbored secrets, fear, and absence was slowly emptied, each room carrying the memory of a life once lived, now honored through remembrance rather than silence. Eleanor walked through the spaces, touching the banister lightly, closing doors gently, leaving the house as it should be left, a place of respect, memory, and acknowledgement. Eleanor reflected on the journey, the years of investigation, the moments of doubt, the small clues that had built a map to truth. She thought of Tina, of the life that had been stolen, and of the quiet resilience that had guided her through every twist, every setback, every unspoken fear. The case had changed her, deepened her empathy, and reinforced her commitment to those whose voices had been silenced. The community, once unaware of the depth of darkness within its midst, began to understand the importance of vigilance, empathy, and speaking up. Neighbors shared memories, stories of Tina's kindness, her warmth, and her ordinary yet extraordinary presence. The staircase, once a symbol of hidden terror, became a symbol of revelation and perseverance, the reminder that secrets may linger but they do not remain forever. In a quiet moment, standing outside the home at sunset, Eleanor whispered a promise she had carried for years. She would continue to uncover the truth wherever it lay hidden, no matter how long it took, because the truth, Eleanor knew, was relentless. It could be ignored, suppressed, or feared, but it would always demand to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. The street was calm, ordinary, bathed in golden light. Shadows stretched across the ground, long and deliberate. The house had remembered Tina all along, and now, the world would remember too. Eleanor took a deep breath, letting the weight of years lift slightly from her shoulders, and walked away with a quiet sense of closure. Tina's story had been told, her life acknowledged, and her absence honored. The truth had spoken, and those who had hidden it could no longer silence it. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel.